The Olympic world was stunned today after U.S. gymnast Simone Biles dropped out of the team competition.
Because of a decision she made to step back from competition for her mental health.
I say put mental health first.
Her courage shows yet again why she is a role model for so many.
In recent weeks, we've seen the mental health of elite athletes become front page news. The heroes we think of as superhuman have become deeply criticised for showing their human side. But the reality is, those few athletes the media have covered are just the surface of a huge underlying epidemic of mental health problems and issues for athletes. Some estimate that up to 75% of Olympians will experience some form of post-Olympic depression. And this is not just for those who lose their events. Those who come home with a medal, and even a gold one, are likely to face the sudden snapback to reality that can take even the most mentally tough completely off guard. But for this experience, it's not as simple as explaining it as just a natural drop in mood after such a massive high. For the vast majority of Olympians, this post-Olympic depression is the result of a build-up of years of factors. Because the reality is, Olympians don't just struggle in training. They end up struggling with every other aspect of life because of the singular focus they've had to develop for, in many cases, 10 or 15 years. So let's explore why so many Olympians are sadly drawn into a life of mental health struggles after realising their childhood dream. So imagine you represent your country at 2 Olympic Games, and then you use your amazing athletic skills to make a switch into a new event and take part in the Winter Olympic Games. You've been a poster girl for your sports and even have won world championship titles. Despite never winning an Olympic medal, you'd expect to have a somewhat comfortable and happy life, right? Well, it turns out you've had to take part-time jobs in between training at places like Home Depot as a restaurant hostess and at a smoothie bar for $7 an hour. This has been the actual reality for Olympic hurdler and bobsledder Lolo Jones. And this kind of existence happens for most Olympians because despite being a professional athlete, you're often just paid a few $100s a month by your country's sporting body. Thousands of elite athletes in the West have to get by on stipends of around $10,000 to $15,000 a year. And this is to pay for their accommodation, food, transport, coaching, and plenty of other costs associated with training. And those on stipends are actually the lucky ones, because many Olympians like Team GB's Bethany Shriver resort to crowdfunding if their sporting body cuts or doesn't allocate funding to their sport. The vast majority of athletes don't have a shoe or equipment deal. Only the cream of the crop get lucrative endorsement deals, so the rest have to find either part-time work that can fit around their training, or they rely on the generosity of their family or even strangers just to realise their dream in the first place. Then once it's all over, after you've spent tens of thousands of dollars just to make it to the Olympic Games in the first place, in most cases you come home with nothing. If you've been lucky enough to win a medal, then your sporting body may give you a cash prize and you'll be able to milk some public appearance fees and pick up a few endorsement deals in the coming months. But if you haven't, you come home to a bank account in the minus tens of thousands of dollars and you're probably having to sleep in your childhood bedroom. And of course, you're probably going to think to yourself, was this really worth it? Poverty is quite simply one of the strongest factors that leads to depression and other mental health problems. And for Olympians, their Olympic dream was what helped ward that off for so long. But then once that dream is actualized or is over, then it becomes all too easy to become suffocated by the financial reality that you then find yourself in. And this directly leads on to the next contributor of post-Olympic depression, the reality of employment prospects. Belinda Hocking is an Australian retired swimmer who represented her country in 3 Olympics. Despite not medalling, she has won world titles, a gold at the Commonwealth Games, and was one of Australia's greatest swimmers of her generation. After she retired from competitive swimming after the 2016 Rio Olympics, she was excited to enter the real world and use her skills as an elite performer in a new career. And she was told by many that she had developed tons of transferable skills from the 2 decades of her life that she had devoted to becoming one of the best in the world at what she did. But 6 months into her job hunt, she was forced to sign up to Centrelink, which if you're from the UK is the equivalent of the job centre, or if you're from the US, like filing for unemployment to receive benefits or social security payments. The blow for Hocking was that she was told time and time again that she didn't have any relevant experience despite her incredible sporting achievements. And the most bitter pill to swallow was being rejected for a basic admin entry-level role at Swimming Australia, her own sporting body. And this is sadly the reality for countless other elite athletes' life after the Olympics. They go from being the best in the world at something to then being overlooked for jobs stacking shelves in supermarkets. Many are excited to move on to something more normal after years and years of sacrifice and are eager to swap the 6 a.m. workouts for a nice 9 a.m. office start. But the reality is there is such a single focus on preparing these athletes for a singular moment. And once that moment is over, you're just left to your own devices. It's rare for sporting bodies to have any programs or services surrounding succession planning or post-athletic career transitions for athletes. And this means again that thousands are pushed off this endless conveyor belt of harnessing young talent. So many will just slump into a rut because of the stream of rejection letters and the realization that at the age of 30 you've got little to no skills that will help you enter a stable career. And this gets compounded further when they look across to their peers that they grew up with who are now high-flying, on a clear trajectory, and are financially stable. And this then ties into possibly the main overarching contributor to post-Olympic depression, the identity crisis. Coming home from the Olympics, even for the winners, often just leaves them feeling a weird sense of emptiness. Both Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian ever, and Shaun White, the GOAT of snowboarding, have revealed that they felt this. Because at the end of the day, for a 4-year cycle, your entire identity is tied to one event. And when it's all over, you have to be alone in a room and ask yourself, who am I going to be now for the next 20, 30, 40, or even 50 years of your life? And if you're not lucky enough to have been set up pretty much for life through endorsement deals, you have to become an everyday civilian again. But the problem is, you've cut yourself off from the real world for so long. Fencer Kelly Hurley after Rio 2016 said, "Should I do school or make new friends? Because I lost them all in the last 4 years when I haven't had time to hang out with any of them." That is the reality. You have allowed friendships to dissolve, miss an infinite number of birthdays, parties, and other family celebrations to train instead. The world moves on after your 2-week dream in the Olympic Village. Everyone goes back to normal, and you now have to join them. And for a lot of athletes, despite not being egotistical, find this very difficult because they go from being somebody to nobody. You go from years of people bigging you up, telling you you're special and have so much done for you by the wider team of professionals that you work with. Then suddenly you're on your own. People give you the 2-minute, wow, you're in the Olympics, that's so impressive. But then that's it. You're back to square one. You're in your late 20s or early 30s and you've reached the peak. You've managed to get to the biggest stage ever and nothing will ever compare to that high again. Even if you want ordinary, there's a part of you that misses the thrill of the race or the roar of the crowd. Nothing will match that again. And for anyone, that's a tough pill to swallow. So it's only natural for you to then question your identity and sense of self-worth, and sadly for too many, this leads to the worst outcomes. Many will chase that high through other means, such as gambling, drinking, and drug taking, and in the very worst cases, some find it too painful to stay alive. In Michael Phelps' documentary The Weight of Gold, it's argued there's a growing epidemic of suicide among Olympians. To date throughout history, over 100 have taken their own lives, including gold medalists. And it's hard to see this changing unless more is done to help athletes with this life-changing transition after achieving their ultimate dream at such a young age.